This is quite an interesting development. The world chooses to turn their face, of course, to Palestinian people and what could be considered as the ever-growing humanitarian crisis at the Gaza Strip. The Israeli state has maintained its resolve and unwavering commitment to secure the Middle East and get rid of any suspicion of threat to their own existence. And that should be prioritized. Now, when you consider the United Kingdom, UK, the Canada, Australia, and Portugal, of course, are making the list for now, and you begin to wonder, does it mean that the Palestinian people does not have the rights, the inalienable right to freely choose their political future? Well, under international law, there are provisions for that. But what Israel is saying, Israel was not against the Palestinian state. Israel was against Hamas, a terror group that have not been even fair to the Palestinian people. The records are there. The manner and the way in which the Hamas malhandled the Palestinian people, they were even crying out for help. So the subjugation is just an extension of what they did to the Israeli on the 7th of October. The world was watching in very suspicious silence and while they rained horror on Israeli. So Israel was not against the Palestinian state, but was against and after the Hamas movement, which is considered as an arch enemy of the Israeli state. They are saying that the government of Palestine should not be controlled by Hamas because their intentions, obnoxious intentions, nefarious intentions, was to annihilate Israel, was to cause pain to the Israeli people. So what Israel was arguing is that let a new government be formed by the people, a democratic government within the Palestinian people that should be a reflection of the people's will, not being usurped or hijacked by these terror-driven individuals. That was the argument. And such should not be misunderstood. He said, don't relinquish the government, don't allow the Hamas to control the government, because neither the Palestinians nor the Israeli will be safe. There could be occasional or sporadic attacks or seasonal attack, as the case is, because when they lay hold on sophisticated or weapon of mass destruction, they would hesitate to use it against Israeli states and her population. So Israel, by my own findings and of course opinion, is not against the Palestinian state. But Israel do not want the existence of a Palestinian state controlled by Hamas. Because once Hamas is in charge of the Palestinian state, is an extension of the Iran, of course, empire. They represent the influence and the mission of Iran. That was the case Israel is making. And I hope the international communities understand exactly the position of Israel. Israel wasn't saying that these people can control, have their own internal governance and arrangement, of course, administrative heads and the rest of them, but it's saying such should not be left in the hands of Hamas, that they are terrorists. So, uh, backing the Palestinian statehood without considering the implication of leaving it in the hands of the Hamas amounts to a global threat, and more importantly, to the threat against the Israeli state. I hope that it's very clear and well explainable. Now, coming to this again, United Kingdom supporting the Palestinian statehood. Of course, they have the rights as an independent state. Why are they fighting against the emergence of the Biafran state? Biafra have been in existence in 1967 to 1970, and eventually the renewed quest for the actualization of the lost sovereignty of Biafra, of course, was embarked on and eventually came to fruition on the November 24 in Latvia, Finland. So the issue here is very critical. Could we say that international politics have been biased with the current realities? Nobody supports the escalation of the war. And sadly, nobody would have expected that this war will linger to this point. But of course, when there is war, sadly, the masses will end up becoming casualties. So, in the interest of humanity and peace, I hope they came to the round table to discuss the way forward and possibly Hamas to release all the hostage or hostages under their control as one of the conditions of a lasting peace. So what is stopping them from doing that? Rather deciding to use them as a shield is rather unfortunate. But the Israeli Prime Minister have said they will respond to all these states backing terrorism in court by supporting the Palestinian statehood. In a matter of time, possibly after having a, a tete-a-tete or closed-door interactions with the President of the United States of America, where this particular convention is going. You know, the United Nations General Assembly is taking place in the United States. Again, another thing you must understand, this move angers Israel, also goes against Trump's stance. You know, Trump also maintained that Hamas should not be in existence, should not control the administrative leadership or governance of the Palestinian people. We've seen the worst they can do at their own best. Sadly, their mission was to embark on horror, to sponsor horror across the Middle East and against the Israeli state. So they should be given, they shouldn't be considered in the first place if the Palestinian statehood should be recognized. It should be a democratic process, government, and not a government that is prone to terrorism and threats to Israel. Mr. Donald J. Trump maintains. While a Western nation take action in frustration over Gaza, when I watch the Gaza Strip bombarding and the rest of them, in fact, only someone without human feelings might not feel certain discomfort over what is happening. See, people are being rendered hopeless and homeless and the rest of them You see, not knowing when the next bombardment might possibly land. But then, sadly, they are using these populations as a shield to unleash terror on Israeli soil. And Israel has given a command or an order, an instruction, of course, using their technological cottage to get the residents informed or intimated to vacate the premises within a specified period of time. But some are defiant, some, of course, decided to stay back, whatever be the case. And Israel wouldn't have been back on such massive uh, military ground operations without, first of all, calling the defenseless civilians or population to vacate. But because they insisted uh, to see whatever be the worst, of course, Israel, when the timeline elapses, Israel went on with their, of course, ground operations because they are determined to end this war. And the only way to end the war is to take the war directly to the Hamas tunnels and bunkers where they are using humans as shields. It is no longer time to allow that happen or hiding behind uh, tall buildings to launch missiles, rockets, intercontinental missiles, and the rest of them on Israeli uh, state. Said, we are going to bring Gaza down. If that is the only way to execute this war and bring Hamas to its knees. It doesn't matter what the world is saying. What matters is justice must be served. And Israel has the right to defend themselves. The right to self-defense is an inalienable right. And being a sovereign state, Israel, of course, has the right to defend its territory and people. It doesn't matter the cost or the consequences of such, but they must face their actions. Western nations take actions in frustration over Gaza, as I have said. Watching what is going on might not be very welcoming, but that is quite unfortunate because the Hamas should be blamed for all this. Honestly, if they have adhered to the terms and conditions for to sue for peace, perhaps Israel wouldn't have been, of course, this all out because Israel have regard for humanity and they wouldn't want much casualties on the part of the civilians. Hence, they have taken too long a time and to sue for peace, and they give Hamas a good opportunity to have taken the right action or release these captives or those they took hostage. But sadly, that didn't turn out to be what was expected. Now, Netanyahu calls the move huge reward for terrorism. Huge reward for terrorism. It is quite interesting, honestly. Now, let me just read an excerpt from this and before we go ahead. It's a very uh, disturbing development with mixed reactions anyway. The decision by four nations from the West, which has traditionally allied with Israel, aligned them with more than, okay, 140 other countries also backed Palestinian nations or separation to forge an independent homeland from the occupied territories. From the occupied territories. Wow, that is quite interesting. In the course of this war, uh, was it Trump that suggested perhaps the Palestinians might possibly be moved to Egypt or other Arab countries, but they rejected that. Even Egypt rejected to accept the Palestinian people and the rest of them. Well, I don't see anything too wrong with the Palestinians having their own homeland where they could govern themselves and chart their own way forward for themselves, but not to use it as a safe haven for terrorism. Yes, or to harbor the art of terrorism. Because whether they have their self-independence or not, once there is an attack on Israel, Israel will not watch and fold their hands to see them eliminate or exterminate them. Israel will definitely defend its territory and people. That is just the case. It is just the truth about the reality unfolding. Now, Britain's decision carried particular symbolism given its major role in Israeli creation as a modern nation in the aftermath of World War II. It is quite very interesting, honestly, today to revive hope of peace for the Palestinian and Israeli and a two-state solution. The United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine, said Prime Minister Keir Starmer. That is quite interesting. The man made humanitarian crisis in Gaza resolve new deaths, and the Israeli government's relentless and increasing from the bombardment of Gaza, of course, the offensive of recent weeks, the starvations and devastations are utterly intolerable. Wow, that is quite, this is a total blockade, total onslaught. Israel declared total war by these grounds oppression and offensive military operations. It is quite a very disturbing case, but then we do hope that humanity will be preserved. And while the Palestinian states are being considered, there are other people agitating for their own independent state. The likes of Biafra, of course, in the eastern Nigeria, the Duduwa in the western Nigeria, and possibly the Arewas, of course, the Araba call has not ceased. As we are hearing from the north, some Boko Haram believe they are fighting for an Islamic state. So such considerations should also be given and more deliberations in order to sue for peace, because in the interest of humanity, the world should be ready to embrace peace and justice for all, not just for selected few. Let's have your own take regarding this development. It's an interesting moment and a very disturbing moment as well. We are trapped in. Who knows what might be the outcome of this, but we do hope that the world will once again, most especially, not just the Northeast, I mean the Middle East, but also here in Africa, will enjoy peace. And there should be regard for the rule of law. the rights of the people to self-determination should not be only limited to the Palestinian state.